The dog was not digging for something she had lost. She was digging for the truth everyone else had buried. Staff Sergeant Ryan Miller heard the sound just before midnight. While walking the quiet back road behind the Bennett house in a small Oregon town where porch lights turned off early and secrets learned to live behind curtains. He walked most nights because sleep came poorly now, especially after rain. The damp air carried too many memories, too many closed reports, too many voices saying there was nothing more to find. But that night, beneath the soft hiss of drizzle and the whisper of maple leaves, Ryan heard claws striking wet soil. Scratch. Pause. Scratch. Not wild. Not playful. Patient. Desperate. He stopped near the side fence and looked into the Bennett yard. Under the old maple tree, half hidden by shadow and rain, a female German shepherd dug with both front paws, her black and tan coat dark with water, her amber eyes fixed on the same patch of earth. Mud clung to her muzzle. A faded blue ribbon hung from her collar, twisted and stained, but still tied there like something someone had once loved enough not to remove. "Easy, girl," Ryan said softly. The dog froze. Her ears lifted. For one breath, the whole yard seemed to hold still. The dark windows of the Bennett house, the wet grass, the garden gate, the maple branches dripping above the small hole. Then the German shepherd placed one muddy paw over the place she had been digging and looked straight at Ryan. She did not run. She did not bark. She looked at him like a witness afraid the last person willing to listen might walk away. Ryan knew the dog's name from town talk. Daisy, the Bennett family shepherd. The dog people said had become difficult after the trouble at the house. The dog who kept escaping from a relative's property and finding her way back here. The dog everyone said was confused. Ryan stepped closer to the fence. Daisy lowered her head to the hole, sniffed hard, then scraped the ground once more, careful and exact. Always the same spot beneath the maple roots. The smell rose through the rain. Wet dirt, cedar chips, old plastic, and something metallic. Not a bone. Not trash. Something hidden. Behind Ryan, a porch light clicked on at the neighbor's house. Mrs. Helen Brooks opened her back door, wrapped in a quilted robe. "She is back again," she whispered across the narrow alley. Ryan did not look away from Daisy. "Again?" Helen nodded, her voice thin with worry. "3 nights. Same tree. Same place. They said she was just upset." Daisy gave a low whine and pressed her paw harder into the mud, as if arguing with every adult who had ever mistaken devotion for disorder. Ryan felt an old ache stir in his chest. Years ago, he had trusted a report that said a case was closed, only to learn later that truth had been waiting under one more question. He looked at the hole, the blue ribbon, the dog's muddy face, and the dark Bennett windows. Then he took out his phone and called Officer Grace Holloway. "I am at the Bennett house," he said quietly. "Daisy is digging under the maple again." He paused as the dog looked up at him, rain shining in her eyes. "And I do not think she is confused." Ryan stayed outside the fence and waited. He had learned long ago that the moment a person decided a truth belonged to him, he could ruin it with his own hands. Daisy kept one paw over the hole, rain dripping from her whiskers, her body angled between the maple tree and the dark house like a small guard posted over a secret. Mrs. Helen Brooks stepped carefully down her back steps, clutching her robe closed against the drizzle. "Officer Holloway is coming?" she asked. Ryan nodded. "I called her." Helen looked toward the Bennett windows. "Caroline will not like this." "She does not have to like it yet," Ryan said. "She only has to let it be checked." Daisy lowered her nose into the hole and breathed in deeply, then gave a soft sound that made Helen's face tighten. "That dog has broken out twice this week," she whispered. "They took her to Caroline's sister after everything happened. Said she was upsetting Lily." Ryan looked at the faded blue ribbon on Daisy's collar. "Lily tied that." Helen nodded. "On her birthday. Daisy wore it every day after that. Lily said blue was for remembering." The word stayed in the wet air. Remembering. Across the yard, Daisy scraped the ground again. Not wide, not random. Only the same narrow place beneath a twist of maple roots. Ryan studied the pattern. The hole was not large. Maybe 12 inches across, 6 or 7 inches deep where the rain had softened the soil. Around it were cedar chips from the garden bed, dark mud, and 2 shallow lines where Daisy had dragged her paws back to the same point again and again. "What happened here?" Ryan asked. Helen's eyes moved toward the house. "You know the broad story. Town talk is not evidence. She sighed. The Bennett family had an old blue metal box. Caroline's mother left it to them. Papers, a silver locket, keepsakes. It disappeared during all that arguing about the property. People said Mark took it and sold what was inside. Ryan turned to her. Did he? Helen shook her head slowly. I never believed it. But the box was gone, and that attorney kept saying Mark needed to sign before things got worse. Attorney? Paul Whitman. Family lawyer. Too smooth for a man standing in another family's grief. Before Ryan could ask more, headlights washed over the wet alley. Officer Grace Holloway parked without siren, stepping out in a dark rain jacket, flashlight low in her hand. She knew Ryan well enough not to mistake him for a man who called over nothing. Show me, she said. Ryan pointed through the fence. Daisy watched the officer approach, then placed her muddy paw back over the hole. Not aggressive. Protective. Holloway stopped at the gate instead of entering. Good girl, she said softly. We are not taking it from you. Daisy blinked, then looked at Ryan as if asking whether this woman was part of the listening. Caroline Bennett opened the back door before anyone knocked. She stood in the kitchen light, pale and tired, a cardigan pulled tight around her shoulders. Behind her, a small girl looked through the gap near the doorframe. Lily. Her eyes went straight to Daisy. She came back, Lily whispered. Caroline put one hand on the child's shoulder. Daisy should not be here. Officer Holloway kept her voice gentle. Caroline, she has been digging in the same place for 3 nights. Ryan called me because there may be something under the maple. Caroline's expression hardened first, then cracked around the edges. That case is closed. Daisy whined at the word closed. Ryan heard it. So did Lily. The child stepped forward, blue pajama sleeves falling over her hands. I told them, she said, barely above the rain. I told them Daisy saw someone by the tree. Caroline closed her eyes as if the sentence hurt too much to hear again. Officer Holloway looked from Lily to the hole. Then we are going to check it correctly. Ryan opened the gate only after Holloway nodded. Daisy did not move away when he entered. She only lifted her paw from the mud, revealing the dark center of the hole and a flash of something blue beneath the wet soil. Officer Holloway raised one hand before anyone stepped closer to the hole. Nobody touches anything until I mark the spot, she said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried through the rain with enough authority to stop even Caroline at the back door. Ryan held still beside the maple tree, his boots sinking slightly into the wet grass. Daisy stood at his knee, breathing hard, her muddy paws planted on either side of the narrow hole, as if she had spent every night holding the earth opened by will alone. The small flash of blue beneath the soil did not look like much at first. Just a corner. Just color where there should have been only roots and mud. But Lily saw it from the porch and made a sound so small it almost disappeared under the drizzle. The box, she whispered. Caroline gripped the doorframe. Officer Holloway photographed the hole, the maple roots, Daisy's paw marks, and the blue ribbon on the dog's collar. Then she knelt and used a small hand trowel from Helen Brooks's garden shed, scraping the soil away inch by inch. Ryan crouched beside her with a flashlight angled low, careful not to crowd the work. The smell rose stronger now, cedar chips, damp plastic, old metal, and the sour weight of something hidden too long. Daisy lowered herself to the ground, chin near the hole, amber eyes locked on the place where Holloway's tool moved. She did not bark. She did not dig anymore. Her part was finished enough for human hands to take over. Slow, Ryan murmured when the edge caught beneath a root. Holloway nodded. I see it. The rain tapped on leaves above them, soft and steady. From inside the house, Lily's breathing came in short, frightened pulls. Mark Bennett appeared in the hallway behind Caroline, unshaven and hollow-eyed, looking like a man who had grown tired of defending himself to rooms that had already decided. When he saw the blue metal corner, he stopped moving. That is not possible, he said. No one answered. Holloway cleared the last layer of soil and revealed a small blue metal box wrapped in torn plastic, its side pressed against a knot of maple root. There were shallow scratches along the lid, marks not from a shovel, but from claws that had reached it and failed to pull it free. Daisy stretched her nose toward it and gave one low, tired whine. Lily came down the porch steps before Caroline could stop her. She told you. The child said, not accusing, not loud, just broken by the relief of finally being believed. She kept telling you. Caroline covered her mouth with both hands. Holloway lifted the box carefully into an evidence bag and stood. We open it inside, on camera, with everyone present. Ryan looked down at Daisy. Mud streaked her muzzle. The blue ribbon clung to her wet collar like a promise that had survived being ignored. He reached out slowly and rested his hand near her shoulder, not quite touching until she leaned into him first. "You remembered," he whispered. Daisy closed her eyes for one breath. Inside the Bennett kitchen, the lights felt too bright after the yard. Holloway placed the sealed bag on the table, started her body camera, and documented the box before opening it. The latch resisted, rusted by wet earth, then gave with a small click. Lily flinched at the sound. Mark gripped the back of a chair. Caroline did not sit. Inside the box lay a silver locket wrapped in cloth, folded family deed copies, a bundle of old photographs, and a water-stained note tucked beneath the papers. Holloway lifted the note with gloved hands and read silently first. Her face changed. Ryan saw it before she spoke. The case was not closing. It was opening in the right direction for the first time. Officer Holloway did not read the note aloud right away. She placed it flat on a clean sheet of paper, took one photograph, then another, and let the kitchen remain silent long enough for everyone to understand that the room had changed. Rain slid down the window above the sink. The old refrigerator hummed. Daisy lay just inside the back door on a towel Helen Brooks had brought in, her muddy paws stretched in front of her, her amber eyes fixed on the blue metal box, as if she still did not trust people to keep it safe. Lily sat on the bottom stair with the blue ribbon from Daisy's collar between her fingers, twisting it softly, not to untie it, only to feel that it was still there. Mark Bennett stood at the table with both hands open at his sides, afraid to hope too quickly. Caroline looked at the silver locket in the box, and all the anger she had been carrying seemed to lose its shape. "What does it say?" she whispered. Holloway looked at Mark first, then at Caroline. "It appears to be a written instruction," she said carefully. The box was not sold. It was hidden. The note references pressure over the property agreement and says the box would be returned after a signature. Mark closed his eyes. He did not smile. Relief arrived too heavy for that. "I told you I did not take it," he said, but the words came out without victory. Caroline stepped back as if the floor had shifted under her. "Paul said." She stopped there, because the name itself seemed to make Daisy lift her head. Ryan noticed. So did Holloway. "Paul Whitman?" the officer asked. Caroline nodded slowly. "He said Mark was desperate. He said if we fought the agreement, we would lose more. He had access to the storage room because he handled my mother's papers." Daisy rose before anyone else heard the car outside. Her body was tired, her paws sore, but she stood between Lily and the front hallway with a low, steady posture. Head forward, ears high, not aggressive, certain. Headlights passed across the kitchen wall. A car door shut. A moment later, Paul Whitman knocked once, then opened the front door as if the house still belonged to his permission. He wore a dark raincoat and leather gloves. "Caroline, I heard there was some disturbance," he began. Then he saw Officer Holloway, the open blue box, and Daisy standing in front of Lily. His face did not fall apart. Men like him learned to smooth fear quickly, but the room saw the pause before the smile. Daisy gave one low growl, not loud enough to be a threat, only enough to name what memory already knew. Ryan looked at the gloves. Dark leather. What at the fingertips, carrying the faint smell of cedar chips and damp soil from the yard. Holloway stepped between Paul and the table. "Mr. Whitman, I need you to remain here while I ask a few questions." Paul lifted both hands slightly. "Of course, but you should be careful. That dog has caused enough trouble already." Lily stood, shaking. "She did not cause it," she said. Her voice was small, but it crossed the kitchen like light. "She saw you by the tree." Caroline turned toward her daughter, tears already forming, not from shock now, but from the weight of what she had refused to hear. Paul's smile tightened. "A child's imagination is not evidence." Holloway glanced at the box, the note, the deed copies, the storage tag still clinging to the plastic, and then at Daisy's steady body between the man and the girl. "No," she said, "but it is no longer standing alone." Ryan stayed near Daisy, one hand lowered beside her shoulder. She leaned into him once, just enough to stay upright. The kitchen smelled of rain, old paper, cedar, wet dog, and the sharp beginning of truth. Mark looked at the blue box, then at Lily. "You were right," he said. The child's face crumpled, but she did not cry yet. She walked to Daisy and put both arms around the German shepherd's neck. Daisy closed her eyes, the blue ribbon brushing Lily's cheek. For the first time since Ryan had seen her under the maple, she was not digging, not guarding, not pleading with dirt or doors or adults. She was being believed. And sometimes, being believed is the first safe place a loyal heart can rest. Officer Holloway did not allow the kitchen to become a courtroom. She asked Paul Whitman to sit at the far end of the table, away from the blue metal box, away from Lily, away from Daisy's tired but watchful eyes. Then she photographed his gloves, his raincoat, the storage tag on the plastic, and the note that had waited beneath damp papers until a dog refused to let it stay buried. Paul spoke softly, carefully, in the voice of a man trying to turn sharp corners into smooth ones. "This is being misunderstood," he said. "Families under stress misplace things. Children imagine things. Dogs dig." Daisy lifted her head at the word dogs, not angry, only awake enough to remind the room that she had done more than dig. Ryan stood beside the back door, rainwater dripping from the hem of his jacket, watching Officer Holloway build the truth without rushing it. Mark Bennett sat near the sink, one hand covering his mouth. Caroline stood behind Lily with both hands on her daughter's shoulders, and every few seconds her fingers tightened, not to hold the child back, but to say what she had not said soon enough. "I believe you now." Holloway read the note aloud at last, leaving out nothing but adding no drama. The words were plain and ugly in their simplicity. The box would be returned after the property agreement was signed. No one needed to know. Mark would be blamed until he became tired enough to surrender. Caroline made a sound like breath leaving a room. Mark closed his eyes. Lily pressed her cheek into Daisy's damp fur. Paul's expression did not change much, but the silence around him did. It moved away from doubt and settled near fact. "That note is not signed," Paul said. Holloway looked at him. "No, but the handwriting will be examined. So will the plastic, the storage tag, the soil on your gloves, and the access records for the family storage room." Ryan noticed Daisy's nose twitch when Holloway mentioned the gloves. The German shepherd rose slowly and took 2 careful steps toward Paul, then stopped beside Lily, choosing position over threat. She placed one muddy paw on the floor between the child and the man, as if drawing a line only honest people could cross. Paul looked down at the paw, then away. That was the first thing he could not polish. Dr. Alan Pierce arrived a short time later, called by Helen Brooks, carrying a veterinary bag and a folded towel. He checked Daisy near the back door, while Officer Holloway continued her work. "Cold, exhausted, sore paws," he said softly. "Nothing severe, but she has been working harder than anyone knew." Lily touched the blue ribbon on Daisy's collar. "She tried to tell us." Caroline knelt beside them, tears slipping freely now. "I am so sorry," she whispered, not just to Lily, not just to Mark, but to Daisy too. The dog looked at her for a long moment, then leaned her head against Lily's knee, accepting what she needed most from the smallest person in the room. Officer Holloway secured the box, the note, and the locket as evidence. She told Mark that the suspicion against him would be formally reviewed and that the property agreement would be frozen until the investigation was complete. No one cheered. Truth does not always enter like celebration. Sometimes it comes in wet, muddy, and tired, carrying the ache of all the days it was not believed. Paul was escorted out to answer questions at the station, still calm on the outside, but no longer in control of the story. When the front door closed behind him, the house seemed to breathe for the first time. Mark crossed the kitchen and knelt in front of Lily. "You were right," he said again, "and I should have listened." Lily nodded, crying now, one arm around Daisy's neck. "Daisy remembered," she said. Ryan looked out the kitchen window, toward the maple tree, where rain had begun to fill the small hole. Under that tree, a loyal heart had dug through mud, doubt, and grown-up certainty until the buried thing finally had a voice. And in that quiet kitchen, the case changed not because someone shouted louder, but because a German shepherd kept returning to the truth. The house did not become whole the moment Paul Whitman left. Truth had entered, but it entered carrying mud on its shoes. Caroline sat at the kitchen table after Officer Holloway drove away with the blue metal box, staring at the empty square where it had rested. Mark stood by the sink with his hands wrapped around a mug of coffee no one remembered making. Lily sat on the floor beside Daisy, one hand on the German shepherd's neck, the other touching the faded blue ribbon at her collar like it was proof the world had not gone entirely wrong. Dr. Pierce finished wrapping Daisy's paws with clean gauze and checked the small scratches along her legs. "She needs warmth, water, and rest," he said. "No more digging for a while." Daisy looked toward the back door when he said digging, ears lifting weakly. Lily leaned closer. "You do not have to anymore," she whispered. Daisy lowered her head onto the child's lap, and for the first time that night, she did not watch the maple tree. Ryan stood on the back porch with Officer Holloway after she returned from securing the evidence in her patrol car. The rain had softened into mist. Under the old maple, the hole was covered with a temporary tarp and marked with small flags, but the yard no longer felt secretive. It felt exposed, honest. Holloway tucked her notebook into her jacket. "Mark will be cleared formally after the lab work and document review," she said. "It will take time, but the direction changed tonight." Ryan nodded. Daisy changed it. Holloway looked through the kitchen window at the dog resting against Lily. Daisy held it in place until someone stopped treating her like a problem. The words settled in Ryan's chest. He looked at the dark yard and remembered another case years ago, one folded into a report too quickly, one where the official ending came before the whole truth had been allowed to breathe. "I once trusted a closed file because it was easier than asking why it closed so fast," he said. Holloway did not look surprised. "You were not the first person to do that. That does not make it lighter." "No," she said. "But tonight you did the harder thing." Inside, Caroline knelt beside Daisy. Ryan could see her lips move through the glass, but he did not need to hear the words to understand them. "I am sorry." Daisy did not leap into forgiveness. She was too tired for ceremony. She simply lifted her nose to Caroline's hand and let it rest there. Sometimes grace is not a grand embrace. Sometimes it is a tired dog allowing a hand to be near. Lily looked up at her father. "Can Daisy come home?" Mark looked at Caroline, and the question passed between them with all the weight of what had been believed, doubted, and lost. Caroline wiped her face. "Yes," she said. "She should have never had to leave." Daisy's tail moved once against the floor. Outside, Ryan watched the maple leaves drip into the mud where the box had been hidden. The ground would be repaired. Flowers would grow there again. The case would move through paperwork, evidence rooms, and signatures. But the first real change had already happened in the kitchen. A child was believed. A father was no longer alone under suspicion. A mother began to apologize, and a German shepherd finally slept without guarding the earth. Ryan looked at Holloway. Some truths do not disappear. She followed his gaze to the tree. "No," she said softly. "They wait for someone faithful enough to bring them back up." By morning, the Bennett house looked different from the street, though nothing outside had truly changed. The old maple still stood in the backyard. Its wet branches stretched over the marked patch of earth. The porch still sagged at the left corner. The mailbox still carried the same faded last name in black paint. But the windows were open for the first time in weeks, letting out the stale air of suspicion and letting in the clean Oregon light after rain. Daisy slept on a folded quilt near the back door, paws wrapped, blue ribbon still tied to her collar. Lily sat beside her with a school notebook open on the floor, not writing homework, only drawing the maple tree again and again, this time with Daisy beneath it and flowers where the hole had been. Caroline moved quietly through the kitchen, making breakfast no one had much appetite for. Mark fixed the loose hinge on a cabinet door because his hands needed a task that did not ask him to explain how it felt to be believed again. Ryan returned just after 9 with Officer Holloway, not for drama, not for a scene, but to check on Daisy and make sure Lily knew the truth was no longer being treated like a child's bad dream. Mrs. Helen Brooks brought muffins wrapped in foil and set them on the counter without saying much. Small towns apologize in food when words feel too late. Lily looked up when Ryan stepped in. "Are they still going to look at the note?" she asked. Holloway crouched so she would not speak down to her. "Yes. The note, the box, the gloves, the storage records. Everything will be reviewed." Lily touched Daisy's ear. "So Dad is not in trouble anymore?" Mark turned from the cabinet, and the screwdriver stopped in his hand. Holloway answered carefully, kindly. "The case has changed. That matters. Your father is not standing where he stood yesterday." Lily seemed to understand that grown-up answers arrive in steps. She nodded and leaned closer to Daisy. "You heard that." Daisy opened one amber eye, then closed it again, as if paperwork was less important than the child's voice. Later, Dr. Pierce came by to check her pause. "She is healing," he said, "but she needs rest. No running back to the maple." Daisy lifted her head at the word maple, and everyone in the kitchen looked at her. For a moment, a small nervous silence returned. Then Lily placed her hand gently over the blue ribbon. "It is done," she whispered. Daisy looked at the child, then at the back door, then slowly lowered her chin to the quilt. It was not surrender. It was trust beginning to learn a new shape. Caroline knelt beside Daisy after the others stepped away. "I thought you were making things worse," she said, her voice breaking softly. "You were trying to make us look." Daisy did not move at first. Then her tail brushed once against the quilt. That single sound did more in the kitchen than any apology could have done alone. Ryan stood on the porch with Holloway while the family stayed inside. The tarp under the maple had been secured, and the rain had left beads of water along the small evidence flags. "Paul Whitman's office is being searched this afternoon," Holloway said. "Financial records, too." Ryan looked toward the tree. "He almost buried more than a box." "Yes," she said. "He almost buried a family." The words were simple, and that made them heavier. Through the window, Ryan saw Mark sit beside Lily on the floor. Caroline joined them. Daisy lay between all three, not guarding one against another anymore, but holding the center of the room like a warm, breathing seam. Ryan felt the old report from his past shift again inside him, the one he had trusted too quickly. But now it had company. Rain on maple leaves, a blue corner in the mud, a child's voice saying she had told them, and a German shepherd who had kept digging until belief finally caught up. As the sun reached the backyard, Lily opened the door and looked at the tree. Daisy raised her head, but did not stand. For the first time, she let the maple remain outside without her. 3 days later, the maple tree was no longer marked by flags. Officer Holloway had cleared the yard after the evidence team finished, and Mark Bennett filled the hole with fresh soil while Lily stood beside him holding a packet of yellow wildflower seeds. Daisy watched from the back porch on her folded quilt, paws still wrapped, blue ribbon soft against her collar. She wanted to go to the tree. Everyone could see it in the way her ears leaned forward, in the way her nose lifted whenever the wind moved through the damp leaves. But each time her body gathered itself to rise, Lily whispered, "Not tonight," and Daisy stayed. That was new. Not obedience exactly. Trust. The kind that takes longer to grow than flowers. Ryan came by near sunset with a small wooden frame from Mrs. Helen Brooks and a cup of coffee he had forgotten to drink. The Bennett kitchen smelled of cinnamon toast, wet grass, and the quiet work of beginning again. Caroline had cleared a place on the wall near the back door, where Daisy could see it from her quilt. On the table lay the old blue ribbon, temporarily removed from Daisy's collar while Lily tied on a clean one, and a photograph of the silver locket taken before Officer Holloway secured it as evidence. Lily had written a card in careful pencil, pressing hard enough to leave marks in the paper. She remembered. No one corrected the uneven letters. No one added more. The words were enough. Mark helped Lily place the faded ribbon inside the frame beside the photograph. Caroline stood behind them, one hand on Mark's shoulder, the other resting lightly on Daisy's head. When the frame closed, Daisy lifted her nose and sniffed the glass, confused that something so familiar now lived where she could not touch it. Lily knelt in front of her. "It is safe now," she said. Daisy looked past the child toward the maple tree. The fresh soil was dark under the evening light. Mark had planted the seeds around it in a half circle, not to hide what happened, but to tell the ground it did not get to keep the final word. Officer Holloway arrived a few minutes later with news no one celebrated loudly. The documents found in Paul Whitman's office matched the note. Mark's name would be cleared in the official record. The property agreement would be reviewed. The case would move forward in the proper way, slow and exact, but it would move forward from truth now, not suspicion. Caroline covered her face and cried into her hands. Mark held her. Lily did not ask what all the legal words meant. She only turned to Daisy and whispered, "Dad is coming back to us." Daisy's tail moved once on the quilt. Ryan stepped onto the porch as the house filled with soft voices. He looked at the maple, at the repaired patch of earth, at the first small seeds hidden properly this time, and felt the old closed file inside him shift again. Not healed all at once. Not forgiven by some easy sentence. but answered by a dog who had refused to let the wrong story stay buried. Holloway joined him at the railing. "You were right to call," she said. Ryan looked through the window at Daisy resting beneath the framed blue ribbon. She was right to dig. The porch fell quiet. Crickets began under the fence. Somewhere down the street, a car door closed and life went on in the ordinary way that feels holy after a truth survives. Inside, Lily curled beside Daisy on the quilt, and the German shepherd finally slept without facing the door, without watching the maple, without guarding the ground. Her work had moved from dirt to memory, and memory, this time, had been placed where everyone could see it. 1 month later, yellow wildflowers grew beneath the old maple tree, small and bright against the Oregon grass, as if the ground itself had decided to tell a kinder ending. The Bennett house no longer kept its curtains closed. Morning light moved through the kitchen windows, across the back door, and onto the framed blue ribbon hanging where Daisy could see it from her quilt. Beside the ribbon was a photograph of the silver locket and Lily's careful words. She remembered. Mark's name had been cleared in the official record. The property agreement had been stopped and reviewed. Paul Whitman's smooth answers now belonged to Officer Holloway, attorneys, and paperwork, where truth could move slowly but no longer be pushed back underground. Daisy no longer dug at night. She slept beside the back door with her paws healed, her black and tan coat brushed clean, and a new blue ribbon tied gently to her collar. Sometimes, when the wind touched the maple leaves, she lifted her head. But she did not rise. Lily would look at her and whisper, "It is safe," and Daisy would rest again. Ryan Miller walked past the Bennett house near sunset after delivering supplies to the Veterans Center. He stopped by the fence, not wanting to intrude, but Lily saw him and waved him into the yard. Mark was planting a small wooden border around the wildflowers. Caroline was setting lemonade on the porch, and Daisy came down the steps slowly. No hurry now, no muddy urgency, only calm recognition. She pressed her head against Ryan's leg. He placed one hand between her ears. "Good girl," he said, though the words felt too small for what she had done. Lily stood beside the maple and looked at the flowers. "She does not dig anymore," she said. Ryan looked at Daisy, then at the ground that had once held more than soil. "She does not have to." Lily smiled and tied a loose blue ribbon around one low branch, not tight enough to harm the tree, just enough to move in the evening wind. Officer Holloway arrived a few minutes later, off duty, carrying a bag of dog treats and no notebook. She stood with Ryan by the fence as the Bennett family gathered on the porch, Daisy lying between them like a seam stitched back through cloth that had almost torn. "Some cases need evidence," Holloway said. "Some evidence needs someone stubborn enough to find it." Ryan watched the blue ribbon lift and fall beneath the maple leaves. Years ago, he had believed a closed file too quickly. That memory remained. But now it shared space with rain, paw marks, a child's voice, and a German shepherd who had kept digging until a buried truth returned to the light. The sun lowered behind the Oregon hills. The wildflowers moved gently. Daisy closed her eyes beside Lily's feet. And Ryan understood that justice does not always arrive with a loud voice. Sometimes it comes softly through wet grass at midnight, carried by loyal paws, and waits beneath a tree until one human finally believes the dog.